when I
QWERTY is so back. Interesting tech is making a comeback, and I'm definitely stoked to sort of ride this wave of not always just defaulting to a slab smartphone. And trust me when I say I do love them, iPhones, Androids, even minimalist slab smartphones do exist, but when you're using them, they're all largely the same, experience-wise at least. You touch here, you tap there, but when it comes down to the tangible feelings of buttons and dials and switches, it's definitely something to be missed, and it's also the reason why people still choose analog sometimes. Even today, other pieces of tech are bringing back these switches and dials we all seem to love, and I can definitely see why. At the same time, I can't say it's any faster than just typing on my screen really, if I'm being completely honest, but there is still something nice about feeling a button with your thumbs while typing at least, or the click of a switch. And for me recently, at least, I've been really enjoying the Titan 2 Elite from Unihertz. Now, the last time QWERTY phones were in was sort of before smartphones took over, at least. And now there's the best of both worlds with something like the Titan 2 Elite, where it's a full-on, nearly uncompromising smartphone experience, but it still has that charm of a QWERTY device. And it's not like other QWERTY devices don't already exist that are smartphones, because they definitely do. And Unihertz has a couple options themselves. And likewise, I've been using the super tiny side phone with the QWERTY tile for some time as my secondary device, and I absolutely love it. But it's definitely compromising as it doesn't really run a full version of Android and leans more into a minimal device without Google Play services, which is a huge plus for somebody who does want to sort of disconnect, but it is very limiting. And where the Titan comes in at least is that it has all the goodies that come with a smartphone with full Android 16 and full Play services. So with the full Android on here and all the features and stuff, and of course the cherry on top that is the QWERTY keyboard, this does end up being an incredible daily driver, and I've sort of just fallen in love with it over the last month or so. The keyboard though, I want to talk about the keyboard. Why are keyboards suddenly in? Why do people care about T9 out of nowhere? And I'm not really sure, if I'm completely honest with that, and I can only really talk about it from my personal perspective, but honestly, it's just really flippin' cool. There is definitely sort of this element of nostalgia for some people, or otherwise just the tactile feeling while typing some people love. Maybe it's just that slab smartphones really are just getting a little bit boring at this point, but the keyboard on here actually feels incredibly well made. There's really just no looseness to the keys, there's no phantom clicks or anything like that, and for all the errors I'm making while typing, it's mostly just coming down to sort of my lack of muscle memory from my BlackBerry days. Sadly, that did not make it with me, I guess, 15 or 20 years later. And while I do love something like my side phone, the key quality is noticeably worse compared to the Titan. Not that that will really stop me from using that device any less, because it is a different device, I'd say, for my use case. Typing on this thing has been absolutely fantastic so far. No, again, it's not faster than me just using my smartphone yet. At least it might pick up the speed over time, but even if it doesn't get any faster than typing on a smartphone, I think I'm okay with that. Considering how fast the world is moving, at least most days, it's just nice to sort of slow down and click some flipping buttons, and I really do enjoy it. If anything though, I do appreciate the ability to sort of fall back on voice dictation if I'm in a scenario to use it. Otherwise, the hybrid functionalities of just having, common symbols on the screen to use really do make this a fantastic experience. And I really do like that Unihertz doesn't sort of pretend to make this a 100% QWERTY device without any other options, and they really do tastefully lean into those touchscreen options when it's actually useful. For the times there is far less light as well, the keys are backlit. The lighting is uniform, it's adjustable, and it does what I need it to do. A little bonus here too on the keypad, and kudos to Unihertz for implementing this, but the display is naturally smaller for an all-around smaller device, and while you're not really blocking too much while swiping with the screen, the keyboard itself can actually act as a trackpad for scrolling and swiping, which is pretty cool. Use it or don't use it, I'm just happy it's there. And it's a little bonus because the screen is a little bit smaller and it's just cool to use. In my month using this thing, at least, there's no part of the keyboard that doesn't really feel thought out. Between the touchpad, the backlight, the hybrid screen items and stuff, and even the physical Android home back and recent buttons, they legit thought this device through. Maybe their other QWERTY devices have the same sort of thing, I don't really know. This is my first Unihertz QWERTY device, but it just feels well thought out. It feels like they didn't just slap a QWERTY device on an Android phone, but actually sort of thought about the user experience, which I can appreciate. So yeah, well done Unihertz on this. Now I can say where the experience may differ a lot for a lot of people coming from a regular smartphone at least is the display experience. Since this screen is effectively going to be almost half the size or so by comparison, coming in at 4 inches. Now the thing about a smaller display on something like this, or even the Light Phone 3, which I've grown to love as a minimalist device, they're the same width or so as a regular smartphone, but they are a lot shorter, so you do end up getting a more squared or short rectangle experience, Articles and apps like Reddit won't really carry as much information. Messaging might cut off some context if you're sort of going through a feed. And of course, social media feeds are completely disrupted with a square display. So at a base point, it's not like there aren't going to be any sort of sacrifices having a device like this with a sort of squarish display. For some people, this is going to be the feature. Having a sort of unconventional screen size might stop you from scrolling less. But honestly, for a lot of people, it's going to be a huge hindrance because it just simply doesn't carry as much information as you might be used to. And while it might not be perfect, of course, again, kudos where it's due. Unihertz did sort of think about a solution for the people who might need to have that 9:16 aspect ratio as you would a normal smartphone. Or yes, even the times we do just want to doom scroll, there is a feature here called mini mode, which does force a small version for a rectangle that you might need on the screen. There's a cute little action button here that you can map shortcuts to, and I'll talk more on this, but for myself, I've just set this to double press, and it does give me that mini mode when I do need it. Outside of that, honestly, the display on this device is surprisingly excellent. It is a 120 Hz OLED display. It gets bright enough outdoors. Content and games look beyond fantastic on here. And of course, being an OLED, it is incredibly responsive. Having spent some good time actually vibing out in here, using this while watching some animes, shows, listening to the music, whatever else, it's done a good job. But while the display on here is absolutely gold, love the display, the speaker on here, there's only one single speaker on here, and it's probably the weakest part of this entire device. I can say it gets really loud, like if I'm listening to music in the shower or whatever, it's perfectly fine, but it loses a lot of the low ends when you pump the volume, and it gets a little tinny, of course, as with any sort of single small speaker. It still does the job, but it is a bit of a weak point on this device, I think. I can't say where it sort of might make up for the speaker on here is actually the camera. Surprisingly, I can't say I'm really dependent on my phone camera as I've previously been because I love my Fuji cameras and all that stuff, but it's not even like they really skimmed on the camera, it feels, and it did end up actually being better than I thought it would be, especially on a device like this. Of course, there's the main lens here, which is I think a 50 megapixel, and notably, they actually have a second telephoto lens on here versus just cropping in the main sensor that most manufacturers would do with a phone like this. And again, it's not even like either of these cameras are compromising or bad at all. Having started this YouTube channel on an iPhone as my main camera, despite the unconventional shape and size of this device, I could literally use this to make YouTube videos if I wanted to. That's just what I found in terms of the actual video quality and the photos and stuff, so just a little bit surprising. Granted, I really am a poor photographer, so I'm mostly talking from the video standpoint, but I can use the photos and videos straight out of camera. I can edit them up a little bit. Whatever it is, it's more than usable, and I just appreciate that, again, this can be a main device. That's to say that the camera isn't lacking in the form where I would want to pick up a flagship device if this were my only device. Being realistic though, no, this isn't going to be as good as a flagship camera, of course not, but it's definitely still good enough. And of course, as a lot of people always say, the best camera is the one that you have with you, and this does a decent job. As well, no part of this device feels cheap, and the build overall is actually surprisingly excellent, and it sort of feels on par with something you would get from Samsung or Apple, quality-wise at least. Granted, most budget phones now sort of feel premium as it's going to get anyways, but it is still well built. This does come in both black and orange, although I do have the orange and I kind of wish I had the more subdued black. I will say between the orange frame and the actual orange on the keypad, the orange could have been a little bit closer to the metal frame, but I imagine it's wildly difficult to sort of color match different materials like this. And we'll see how this keypad sort of holds up over time. I remember the OG Blackberries would sort of fade after a couple of years, so hopefully we don't see any sort of fading on this keyboard, but only time will tell. Going back to that accent key though, it's something that I didn't even know would sort of be on this device, but I really do dig it for its sort of multi-use case. For me, I've mapped this to three things, of course. Like I mentioned before, I have the mini mode when I do double press this. If I single press it, it takes me to my audiobook player, and of course, I long press this and it will activate my flashlight. Separately, the power button does double as a fingerprint scanner as well, which is probably actually one of the most sensitive fingerprint scanners I've ever used. This is both good and bad because there's times where I just want to sort of take my phone out of my pocket just to check the time, and it unlocks the phone, which still gives me the time. But if I sort of accidentally press it enough times, I have to enter my password. Not the biggest thing, but I figured I'd mention. I'll barely graze the fingerprint scanner and it'll unlock, which is a pretty decent thing to have. Separately though, there is still face unlock if you want to use that, which is pretty cool. There is also an IR blaster here, which isn't really something I've used as of yet. I'm not sure what I'd use this for, maybe as a remote. If anybody has any app recommendations for the IR blaster, I'd love to check that out. But it's cool to see. And this does also have 256 gigs of onboard storage. I'm definitely stoked to see expandable storage on here, which is something that we're seeing less and less when it comes down to these devices. For any of my music buffs out there, I have no idea what the quality of the DAC is on here. I'm not sure how to test that. I've only recently just gotten to sort of higher fidelity audio, but this does have a USB Type-C to 3.5 millimeter dongle in the box. So if you do want to sort of listen to music with your expandable storage, that's something that you can do. But I'm happy that's included because a lot of people care about that. Now, as for the rest of the Android experience on here, it's straight up full on Android 16 with Google Play services and everything. The only downside I've found so far is that some apps just aren't available through the Play Store. My guess is that it could could be because this has a square display. It could be that there's some updates needed down the road, but I figured I would mention that. There's only been one singular app so far that I have not found on the App Store, and that's been Blackmagic Camera, which is my preferred way to sort of film video content with my phone. But Android being Android, I literally just installed Aurora Store instead, which is sort of a Google Play Store alternative, and I just downloaded it and installed it because Android can do that. That same Blackmagic app that I couldn't find on Play Store ended up working perfectly on this device, so not sure what that's about. But as a full-on Android phone, it is still nice to have all the apps I'd want, and it's nice to have a full keyboard at the same time. And honestly, there's really not much missing here. The biggest thing I love to see on here is the full customization with this device since it is Android. The out-of-box experience is brilliant with the default launcher, but regardless of what phone I use, I typically always love to put on Niagara launcher just to sort of keep things a little bit more minimal, and it really is just a personal preference. Even as an Apple user, I've got my Apple Music on here, which somehow still looks pretty good on a square display. I've got my iMessage using Open Bubbles, which maybe took like 5 minutes to set up. I get a lot of questions on how I get iMessage on my Android devices, and I just use an application called Open Bubbles, and I can self-host it for free through like my Mac Mini or something. It takes like 5 minutes to set up. Definitely take a look into that. Likewise, Android Auto is fully supported on here, which is badass. I know this is a huge one for a lot of people, so I'm stoked to see it. This does also have NFC. If I'm not mistaken, this is supposed to have Google Wallet support, but it's not working yet, so hopefully this comes in an update, but something to be mindful of. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having tap to pay on here. I gotta talk about the battery though when it comes here, because it has been a little bit surprising. I can say with all my usage between playing my first Pokemon Nuzlocke run, watching a ton of stuff, and just normal daily use, the battery has been surprisingly fantastic. It could be obviously that I'm not watching much social media on a square screen, but I just half expected the battery to be bad on here because it's a small device, and it's actually held up pretty decently. While I'm not watching as much content as I typically might again on that square display, I'm gaming a whole lot more on here because of the buttons, and even with that gaming, the battery's been decent. If I'm completely honest, I find battery tests completely pointless. I just gotta mention that the battery's better than I thought it would be, and this thing typically gets me through a day and a half, 2 days perhaps without charging, which is more than I thought it would. Sadly though, there is no sort of wireless charging on here, which would have been awesome, but I don't think the trouble of plugging in my phone through the Type-C port is that much of a trouble. With this, I want to sort of talk about some of the things I love about this device, as well as some of the things I don't like all too much. And the first thing I got to talk about is frankly just the size of this thing. I have an infatuation with small and light tech, and this falls into that small category, and I just love that it's tiny. That's literally it. It's a small, functional, unique device that doesn't really have any downsides. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but I like that it exists because this is a device that can be your daily driver, and it's tiny. A lot of tiny phones are just disappearing, which is a bummer. As long as you're fine with a square display, you're gonna have a good time with this. The other thing I love here is mini mode, and I'm just happy it exists. On another device like my Light Phone 3, let me just get it. On my Light Phone 3 here, for example, this has Apple Music and a lot of stuff on here. It's, again, more of a minimal device, but this does not have anything like mini mode on here, which actually stops me from using certain apps completely because they just simply cut off and there's no way to get that information back. So mini mode on the Titan allows me to get everything that I need, which is pretty awesome. Now, obviously the Light Phone is meant to be a limiting device, so I'm not gonna hold it against it all too much, but I'm just stoked that the Titan 2 Elite is an option because it does everything you need to do, and again, it can be your daily driver, which is badass. Plus, it has that QWERTY keyboard, which I really love, but I want to talk about some of the other things that I don't like all too much. The first thing really is that there is no MagSafe or wireless charging on here, which would have been a cute little bonus. Even without the wireless charging, I'm fine sort of just plugging my phone in, but some sort of MagSafe would have been nice, even if it's just for the sort of mounting points. Now, I could always just throw on a 5-cent little MagSafe sticker or something on here to give myself that mounting point, but then I got a sticker on the back of my phone, and I'm not sure I want to do that. And the second thing I have to sort of nitpick about really is just a fingerprint scanner. Again, it might just be a little too sensitive. This is a good and a bad thing. Maybe if it had, I don't know, like palm rejection or something, if that's possible, because again, sometimes I'm just reaching into my pocket, I might be checking the time real quick, and I got to enter my password. Not the biggest thing, of course, but the fingerprint scanner might be a little too sensitive. That's all. And of course, there's one other small thing to nitpick, in that it's the speaker. It's kind of booty cheeks. Again, it gets hella loud. It's good for music in the shower, listening to music casually, whatever the case is. Maybe if they added a second speaker, it would have fared a little bit better, but that is a bit of a downside for me on this device. But yeah, that's my thoughts of the Titan 2 Elite. I am beyond happy it exists in the world of smartphone slabs. As great as those can be, sometimes it's really nice to have a small ass, uncompromising phone with a QWERTY keyboard. And for this specifically, one of the things I just appreciate is that it feels well thought out start to finish for this sort of user experience, especially when it comes down to keyboards, which can be pretty janky on Androids. If you guys do have any questions about this thing, leave them down below. I'm happy to answer them because this device is actually pretty exciting. With that, I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time.
Oh no, I don't. But I held